DJ PK, and we're joined once again by RSL head coach Pablo Mastroeni. Pablo, good morning.
Good morning, guys.
Pablo, as you know, you have Trey Fitzgerald usually standing within arm's reach of you, and Trey loves a good stat, probably a lot more than you do. And he'll always feed his stats, and he hasn't yet, but I suspect he will in the next 24 hours. Your teams haven't had very many three-game losing streaks. You've lost back-to-back. You got Portland Saturday trying to avoid a three-game losing streak. To what would you attribute that?
Again, I think it's. I say this and it's a bit redundant, but when you stick to process, again, you take the emotional piece out of it. You know, when we break down games, we're not breaking down technique. Although on the day it could be poor technique or execution. We just talk about process and you know, our positions. We talk about decisions, but we do it in a manner that eliminates emotion. And so I think streaks of any kind are very emotional, whether they're good or they're bad. And so again, this week we really just been talking about how we could have done better in the first half from a structural perspective and decision-making perspective to allow us to get into the game and not give away so many cheap balls in our build that led to so many really good chances for LA, right? And so that's really been the focal point. And so now tomorrow we have a great opportunity to, again, put the week's worth of work into action and have a dynamic of performance with better understanding as to how different teams' defensive shapes will affect our build. And Portland will, they've been really good on the road. And so we've got to do an exemplary job of building from the back and eliminating high-risk decisions that will potentially, put us behind the score sheet. So I think that's a big part of, why we've been able to stave off these streaks, whether, good or bad. It's really about process.
I'm watching the game Sunday, and you guys are coming down and getting into position. And, I don't understand all the ins and outs. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. But I'm thinking, man, your guys getting roughed up big time to the point of virtually getting tackled. And nothing was called. And, they showed you with your hands up on the sidelines, blah, blah, blah. And so, you talk about control, what you can control. Most coaches say all that stuff. I'm wondering in terms of explanations, so you can then not just get an explanation as to why something was or wasn't called, but that you can actually have an explanation, and then therefore you can then teach your guys, okay, this over here is acceptable, this isn't. And I'm wondering if you got that, so then you can be able to use that to your advantage going forward, because not only did it seem like you got screwed in the moment, if you don't get something where you're told what is acceptable, what isn't, then you don't know how to impart your knowledge and what you've learned to your guys.
Right. No, that's a great point, PK. So after on Monday, so following the game, Kurt Schmidt and I were on a call with the pro referee committee, or the manager, and someone from the league as well. And we were on a call for an hour and a half. And basically the head of pro said it was a blatant dog-so denying of a goal scoring opportunity, which should have been a red card and would have had us playing up a man for the next, whatever it was, 50-something minutes. So that's what they said. It was an error, right, by the referee. And so I think the toughest part, and so, we got a little bit, we got granular a bit with how they perceive games should be, managed or refereed, and the way that we think it should be moving forward. And so what they were talking about is they put a lot of emphasis on referees managing the heat of the game, the emotional state of the game. And what we've been saying is, Kurt and I have been saying, if you referee the game the same in the first minute as you do in the 85th minute, you're going to alleviate all this game management by the referee, which obviously, he's going to have his biases. He's going to be, affected by the home fans. If he sets a standard early on, and again, thinks about process as opposed to the emotional part of the game, he'll be able to conduct himself and I think manage the game in a way that makes sense to both players and coaches, as you were asking, PK. But if you're saying that a foul in the first minute and the same foul in the 60th minute are going to receive different types of treatment, well, then there's no way to ever find the middle ground here from a playing perspective and a coaching perspective. We can't move the needle from that regard, because what you're saying is dependent on the day and the referee and the heat of the game. These are all factors that are going to dictate whether that was a foul or that wasn't a foul, right? And so if we can be more consistent as referee crew from minute 1 to minute 90 and say, yeah, you pulled his shirt in the first minute, that's a yellow card. You pulled his shirt in the 90th minute, that's a yellow card. And so that, and you'll, as games start, I'll always say, like, if that's not a yellow card, then we can go through the back of someone later on in the game, and you're going to tell me that's not a yellow card. And he'll say, well, I can't tell you that, but more than likely. And so you're leaving all this subjectivity to it. And I think the best way to do it, to be objective and stay processed, is if someone pulls a shirt in the penalty box in the first corner kick, well, that's a PK. Yeah. Because it's going to happen in the 80th minute, and then you have to call all of those. And so you set a precedent with your decisions early on in the game that if they're not adhered to as the game goes on, that's where you start to get players and coaches losing their minds, because we don't know the goalposts keep moving on us, right. And then it just becomes a thing of like, well, he just doesn't like us on the day, or there's very little objectivity, and that's what we're really screaming for moving forward. But they did acknowledge that it was a huge mistake, that it did define the game. We don't get any points for it. They're going to discipline the referee as they see fit. But I also think that, not having a public announcement, not holding, the referees, and I think it's due to their CBA with the league that they can't do that. But just it'd be great to hear from them, at times, and when games get out of control, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are managing the game. So, so that's where we're at with all that.
Well, we kind of heard through it. We kind of heard from it through you right now.
Right. Yeah, that's it. That's the only way. And it's going to take an hour and a half call after every game if that's what we want to do. And that's just not worth it, because again, there's a lot of ways we could have affected the game. And that's what we focused on. But at the end of the day, these non-calls or calls that decide games. And there's another interesting stat. In the 6 years that I've been here, we've been the most penalized team in the league as far as we've been given the least amount of PKs awarded. Yeah. And we've also been penalized the third most in the league, which is, over 6 years, it's a pretty good sample size where, and so now they're going in to evaluate the amount of VAR decisions that have not gone our way or gone our way. And I think they're going to be quite surprised that the majority of those don't go in our favor as well. So there's something to it. However, I think the most important thing is, like we always talk about, controlling what you can control, but just letting people know that I think is a good starting point.
Okay, give me a couple numbers and I'll make a couple calls.
He's got cousins in Jersey. And speaking of New York, Pablo, you probably don't know this because you weren't here. I don't know if you were in Colorado or Houston at the time, but when Mike Petke was here, he flat out said, and I about fell off my chair, he said, I can't believe it. We got all these calls when I was in New York. We get none of them when I'm in Utah. He went right to big market bias. And he had some famous meltdowns that no matter how much you wave your arms on the sideline, you will never match. There was a time he demanded to come back on a post-game TV show with Dunny and I because we hadn't asked him a question. And Dunny and I both told him later, yeah, we did. You didn't want to answer it. And he actually apologized the next day. He said, I was just so mad. And it asked Trey about, hand him out, Trey, or pass him out. I can't remember now. Pass him out. They actually had the still frame of the moment the foul occurred. Yeah, he was beside himself. So this has been going on long before you. Don't take it personal. And for the fans, for the longtime fans, this is all baked into their DNA because this goes back to the Utah Jazz and the Chicago Bulls in '98 in their minds. So
Right. Well, I think, again, the onus is on us to win a championship, win a trophy, and start changing the narrative. I think that's win another trophy because, again, I think the more that we're relevant in the standings, the more that we're relevant, hopefully those biases start to change, But, again, the LA Galaxies and the New Yorks and these teams with star players, that obviously is going to affect a referee. A referee is human, right? So if Messi's on the field, it's going to change his whole demeanor, and – reffing a game in L.A. with Peck and Paintsel, if that was Paintsall on the other side, that would have been a no. He wouldn't have even waited. He would have reached to the back pocket and given whoever a red card if that was Paintsall. So these are things that, we have to navigate, and it might be a little bit more difficult. But I think there's a lot of situations that we can improve upon from our last game, and that's been our sole focus this week.
So then do you make sure that that's your concern and the players don't get caught up in it?
Yeah, that's basically it. I think acknowledging that the referee made a mistake. I'll say that to the players, but I'll say here as we do this recap, here's quite a few other areas where we need to continue to tighten up to be a top team in this league. So I think it's one acknowledging that they messed up, so it's not solely on us as a group, but now let's control what we can, and these are the areas we need to continue to work on.
When you're in league meetings, whether it's all the coaches, all the general manager, chief soccer officers, or all the owners, and this kind of topic has to come up at some point. I mean, there's a lot of other business to take care of, but it seems to me like the discussion ought to go, and this is where I think everybody should just copy the NFL because they've got this stuff down cold. They've figured it all out. That all of these jersey pulls, all of these, when in doubt, it's a foul. And defensive people in the NFL will tell you, every rule is against the defense, every call, because they want more offense. They tweak the rule book, and every shirt pull on a corner should be called, and that will stop the shirt pulling, and that enables the players with the real skill to show it. You wouldn't want some hack like me coming out and just hanging on for dear life, and then there are no goals scored. That doesn't make any sense when you're trying to build an entertainment product, which this is. Why not let the best players play? Why let people tackle people and kick people? And why let them flop around on the ground for that matter? That's not fun to watch. Red card them, and no one will roll around on the ground anymore.
So that's exactly what we talked about is I think in being worried about an effect without actually taking action. So, for example, the 10-second rule of substitution, like no one liked that rule. Like all the players want to just like you're wasting time. So from a game management perspective, it's not a good rule because you can't kill the clock like you used to be able to. However, there's a consequence to it. So therefore, like the other game, I think Serge Solon's didn't come out in 10 seconds, and so we had to wait 2 minutes or a minute, I think it was, for the next player to come in. And so there's consequence. So then what do? So the next day is like, guys, don't forget substitutions. I know we talked about this in preseason, but substitutions, you got to come off in 10 seconds, right? So then we are forced to change our behaviors as coaches and players, right? But the rule has done something really good, which is speed up the game and not allow these teams to waste time in this regard. So the same thing could be said about shirt pulling. But the one thing, DJ, is like now you've got to call it every time.
Yep.
Because now it can't be. So then pretty soon there's no one ever touching a jersey. And you'll go back and look at games in like 2025 and be like, you believe we used to touch jersey? We used to be able to pull jerseys back. So you're just changing behavior. And I think all these rules would do that, but you got to hold the standard, and it can't. There can't be any biases. And there's some that are going to be a little bit gray. But when you have a handful of jersey, that's not gray, right? It's black and white. So I agree with you. I think all these rules that we want to implement, we have to implement it and not fear consequences. That, if we do that, then this may happen. We'll do it and then figure it out. Don't just assume that something's going to happen as a byproduct of something that hasn't even been tested yet.
In every season, I'm sure you know this, you can speak to it, losing streaks happen, tough times happen. It's very rarely that somebody or some team or whatever goes through unscathed. And when these things occur, how important is it for you to maintain your level of consistency so there isn't some form of anxiety that the players can sense and then they might internalize it themselves?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's something that obviously with a bit of experience I've been really cognizant of. I think as a younger coach, what you're doing is you're wearing the emotions on your sleeve, especially after games. And the funny thing is that we're all in the same boat, players and coaches, and sometimes you want to get after the players, right? And the only time I've ever in recent years anyways, been emotional after a game was never about the performance. It was about the effort. And I've only done that maybe twice in my time here. And obviously with this group, effort is a standard, right? And so everything else, it's about really thinking about is how do I want the players to feel after games? And that's what I say to myself. How do I want them to feel? Do I want them to feel like maybe it wasn't good enough, but we're a fantastic team and we're going to do better? Well, then my speech is always surrounded around that. Like, here, guys, we weren't sharp. We gave them opportunities. But listen, I've seen 7 games where we've been one of the top teams in this league. We're going to get back to work this week, and we're going to show next week what we're really capable of when we put all these things together, right? So it's acknowledging the fact that maybe on the day it wasn't good enough from whatever perspective, but it's also recognizing their effort to this point, their quality to this point, what I've seen with my own eyes, and what we're going to do this week to make sure the following week happens. So, PK, to your point, it's really about managing emotions after games because, again, the biggest critics are the guys in the locker room, right? They're really critical, and if I start pointing fingers, they're going to start pointing fingers, and then we create a different type of culture that we don't want around here. So I'm the first to accept responsibility for all these things and making sure that the workforce, the talented workforce we have, is prepared to take on Tuesday with a great mindset for the following Saturday.
So what did you want Victor Olatunji to think and feel after that game? Because he started last year, he looked good. He got hurt this year, and Salon's played great, so you didn't want to take him out. Victor got to start. What'd you think, and what did you want him to leave with?
Yeah, I think, again, the toughest thing for the striker position, it's there's a lot of confidence involved in that position, right? I think it's getting a lot of, you're not always going to score the chances that you're given, but over, maybe 2 or 3 games, you're going to probably knock 1 or 2 of those in. And I think Victor was in a lot of good positions, but there's also a little bit of rustiness, right? But I thought the effort was really good. I thought, he took on some really good positions, and maybe the execution of certain plays didn't come off. And so that's understandable. But it's also acknowledging that we have a guy in Sergi that's at a great run of form. And like I keep telling Victor, we're going to need everyone here, right? And there's going to be a time where Victor, Sergi, whatever reason is not playing as many minutes, whether it's form or, he's injured and can't play in a certain game. And so the onus is on us as a coaching staff to make sure that Victor is always ready. And when I say ready is not only technically we're giving him a lot of reps, but emotionally, like he's ready to contribute in a meaningful way. Because again, the worst thing you can do as a staff is just stare at the guys that are always on the 11s and not give any love to the other guys. And then something happens to those guys, and now you're going, "Hey, we need you now." And he's like, "No, you guys weren't around when I needed you guys, right?" And so that's something that we as a staff have to be very deliberate in taking part in and making sure that we're connecting with everyone, in particular the guys that aren't playing in these moments, so that when called upon, they'll be ready to go.
Pablo, we appreciate it. That was a lot of refereeing talk, but that is what the fans are talking about right now. So thanks for enlightening us a little bit.
Awesome, guys. We'll see you guys next week.
All right, there's Pablo Mastroeni, RSL head coach. We got to take a break. When we come back, it is Game 6 tonight. The Mammoth and the Golden Knights. We'll be talking playoff hockey next. Stay with us right after the break, and we'll get to Game 6. DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.